Welcome everybody to the Community Economic Development Committee. You want to do the roll?
Mr. Weddleton?
Here.
Ms. Kennedy? Here. Mr. Peterson?
Present.
Mr. Constant is absent. Mr. Dunbar is absent. Ms. Salatov? Here. You have a quorum.
Thank you. So we have 3 marijuana licenses or issues in front of us today. Any changes on the agenda? No? Okay. So for the people who are applicants, as we hit yours, go ahead and sit up front. And then as we discuss these things, mostly it'll be between staff and the assembly, but then if you have something to say, just raise your hand. I'll be sure to call on you. But we don't want to do the cross conversations, but everyone will get a chance to say what they need to say. So we are starting out today with the treehouse. And the treehouse.
Good morning, Jana Waldine, attorney for the Treehouse.
Josh Boots.
I guess we could go around actually who's here. So it's, we got us, we got Dean Gates.
Ryan Yale, Planning Department.
Sean O'Dell, Planning Department.
Mandy Honest, Clerk's Office.
Colleen Peterson and interpreters.
Chris Schutte, Director of Economic Community Development.
Go ahead, Bill.
Bill Russell, Alaska Rustic.
Jason Brandeis, attorney for Alaska Rustic.
Ace Cole Studio 420.
Okay, good, thank you. Okay, Mandy, how's the license?
So for the Treehouse AK, this is their retail license. With the review of the application for the muni and the state, all of the license restrictions were addressed in their operating plan. There weren't any taxes, fees, or fines found due. They addressed all of the safety and security requirements as well. There were no comments from the health department regarding the operating plan, just that they must complete the dry and full shelf inspections prior to opening. All retail license restrictions were also addressed in their operating plan. The only thing that they didn't mention, if you're selling concentrates, just make sure they're stored, refrigerated, locked. So there were no recommended conditions for the license.
All right, thank you. And Sean, this is yours.
Okay, the applicant, the Treehouse AK, is applying for a special land use permit for a marijuana retail facility totaling approximately 2,300 square feet of space within an existing building. The proposed facility is within an I-1 district, and it's generally located northeast of the intersection of Camelot Drive and Boniface Parkway. The facility retail sales establishment will be open 7 days a week from 8 a.m. to midnight. The petitioner has non-conforming rights for the lack of parking lot perimeter landscaping at Boniface Parkway, parking lot interior landscaping, and site enhancement landscaping. That's been established by a non-conforming rights letter. They will need to resolve the off-street parking and accessible spaces. They're currently working with the traffic department and engineer to go through that as we speak. The plans submitted require, actually the proposed use of the site as marijuana retail sales establishment is consistent with this classification, the Anchorage 2040 land use plan, and the current I-1 light industrial zoning designation. And the planning department recommends approval of the special land use permit subject to the conditions as stated in the staff report.
Great, thank you. Any comments?
Well, I've actually driven by this. This is actually in my district, amazingly, and it seems to me like the parking lot looks big enough. I never saw all that many cars parked in that parking lot, but it seemed, if I remember when I was reading last night, it said that they needed to find additional parking.
Yes, per the code, it says that they need 100 spaces and they have 61. However, the code also states that you can go through a parking study. As you stated, it doesn't appear to be full. So they can do a parking study through an engineer with the municipal traffic engineer, and she can sign off on that to say yes, even though the code says it's this many spaces, the way it's operating out there, there's adequate parking provided. And there is parking in the rear of the mall as well. A lot, actually quite a bit, or quite a bit of space back there. It just may need to be striped appropriately.
And so that's in the works now?
Yep.
Yeah, we're working with Melissa Branch to do the parking study and
Some of the non-conforming.
yeah, and
right away. There's a right away issue as well.
Okay, great, thank you.
Megan?
Thank you. What happened with the community council? It feels like it went really sideways. Can you
Well,
just
so I mean,
briefly.
Yeah. So briefly, when their first initial blush was when I sent them the public notice, which is the application that we're supposed to send community councils for public notice. And granted, it has very little information. So I think when they first read the regulations, there was an older gentleman on their board.
Yeah, he was on the board at the time.
Yeah, and he was an attorney, so he read the regulations and he says, "Wait a minute, we're supposed to get a whole application." And I was like, I agree, the language is kind of wonky, but this is all I have to give you at this point. But Josh has gone 2 or 3 times.
I've gone twice.
Twice, and then we're actually asking you to postpone this, so we don't have so we're not heard next Tuesday, but the following Tuesday that you meet, the 24th. One, because I'll be in Nome for the Marijuana Control Board meeting, but 2, Josh has a 3rd community council meeting with them where they're, hopefully going to sign a memorandum of understanding. It'll be their first one. Josh and Nick just walked in. Nick is the other owner of the Treehouse. They're the first to take a stab in this area with this community council to try to get an establishment in there. So they were just a little unfamiliar with the process, but I think we're on a good path now with them. And so like I said, by the time, if you deem it appropriate to continue this to the 24th, when I can be there and when Josh can do the 3rd meeting with the community council, we should have a better update for you on the community council issues.
Thanks, Pete.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and just for informational purposes, when we first started putting together the rules and regulations for legalized marijuana, the Northeast Community Council passed a resolution 20-1-0 or something, saying they didn't want any marijuana stores in that entire part of town. And there's been a couple changes to people on the board, so we'll see what happens with the next, with the next meeting. But I wasn't at all surprised that you got a little bit of a runaround from that community council. They're pretty anti, I guess.
Well, it seems like once they've gotten to know Josh and Nick, they've kind of gotten more supportive.
Yeah, and I think like Pete said, there's been some changes to the board, and I think maybe there's a little bit different view at this point. So hopefully, and I've gone twice, spoke, and I think cleared up some concerns. So I think that moving forward, they'll probably be more receptive to work with us.
Thank you. Dean, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I had 2 questions. I was wondering, there's the non-conforming rights determination. That doesn't come with the parking. But because it's a change of use for the building, they need to bring the parking up to date.
The non-conformity determination, there were some things lacking, and they're actually updating the non-conformity determination to address that. It was the way it was striped with their site plan.
But it doesn't cover the parking, the amount of parking they have.
It did, yes. Yeah.
I think what Dean is asking is why do we need 40
spaces?
Yeah.
Because, let's see here. Hang on,
I think
Dean.
there's 2 restaurants in there, and so those require quite a bit of.
Yeah, but he's having
Yeah.
Oh.
Hang on, Dean. So, in the. It looks like there was some expansions or changes after 1978, so that made it legally non-conforming.
What did that, what that did is decrease their non-conforming rights, then, is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Chipped away at it. So we're working through it.
Dean, you got a second question?
I saw the application. There was another marijuana establishment. It sounds like it's across the street, Uncle Herb's. But you said the community council hadn't addressed anything before.
Uncle Herb's is a different community council.
process?
right across the street.
Yeah, so
yeah.
Uncle Herb's is actually in, and I'm doing that
It's a-
application as
it's a
well.
Russian Jack.
Yes, it's a Russian Jack, and so if anyone to that community council was totally supportive, and you'll see that
When
application.
council is on the street.
Yeah,
or just-
yeah, it's just across the street, yep. So you'll see that application, I think, in October.
Yeah, Dean, Uncle Herb's has not, it's still in the review process with planning.
Oh,
Yeah.
they're not.
They're not an
Yes.
establishment or an approved establishment yet, correct?
Thank you.
Chris?
Thank you. And so what was the issue with relocating the loading berth?
You know, I don't know, I was gonna ask, Sean that, and I actually asked Josh that too, but I think,
With Randy, I believe
Yeah.
it's in the right of way, which is what you guys are addressing,
Yeah.
the state right of way.
yeah, that's that overhang, right?
Yeah, yeah, so it's in the state right of way is where they showed it on their proposed site plan, so they're gonna have to show it somewhere else.
But
And
are they required to have a loading berth?
it's for the gas station, right?
It's for the gas station, yeah.
Because it's a strip mall.
Because, yeah, the whole strip mall kinda gets a review.
Yeah, so we have to bring the whole strip mall up to compliance just for this one shop because of the change of use, and because marijuana always has to come to this body for approval, we always get hit with that change of use hammer. Even though all of those uses have changed, they just didn't do what they were supposed to do and come in and file a change of use. So we are.
Okay, but we are, if you don't mind, but we are requiring that the loading berth be moved.
It's either be moved or resolve it with the right of way, with the
State,
the state, the DOT.
Okay.
With the state right of way. So-
which can be an encroachment permit.
Yeah, so that's what, one of the things where Melissa is helping us with.
Thank you.
There's quite a bit there, really, on the
Mhm.
site. I mean, are you confident you can
Well-
get through everything?
Yeah, the landowner has been super supportive and super
Right.
helpful, and he owns the strip mall, and so he's taking some of the responsibility for these, issues that should have been rectified.
Okay, that's great. It doesn't always happen that way.
No, it doesn't always happen that way, but Josh and Nick have made a really good relationship, and so we're okay.
Yeah, we should be okay.
So I was curious, I didn't read the fat packet before, but what were the issues at the community council? They might be in here, but maybe could you outline some of the key
I mean, I think they were
concerns?
just anti-marijuana in general. I think the general consensus was that, marijuana is bad, they don't want it in their community. There's already a lot of the comments were that, there's a lot of alcohol and drug abuse in that area, and why do we need another one, basically?
Yeah, they thought it would bring crime, they thought it would lower property values. Both of those things the industry has proven is not gonna happen. And then I think the back and forth with the community council with the gentleman that's a lawyer was just me and him kind of spouting off at each other, going back and forth on regulations, but that's
Yeah.
purely technical still.
I don't
He wasn't
think it-
reelected to the board, so he hasn't even been coming to the meetings anymore.
Yeah.
But the issue, you're saying that somehow in the wording it says they have to come with a full packet?
No, so what the regulation says is you have to give the community council a copy of the application, but the copy of the application, the only application piece that we have when we're supposed to do that is that public notice one sheet that just says name of the applicants, where the location is, and their contact info. So I can understand how, if I wasn't involved in this process and I read that, I would think it meant more than that. The application term meant like the whole packet, but we're required to notice them right away. So we don't have all that stuff.
Right, okay.
But we did give them copies of everything now. They have everything, and they've had everything for months.
I think they felt, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I think they felt like we were trying to avoid our responsibility or something.
Yeah, they didn't understand that there was that was the other thing, that's a good point. They thought that because we were gonna be in front of the control board before their objection period was up, that we were somehow trying to not give them the chance to object. And we weren't trying to do that, it just was the way the timing fell, and so I tried to explain to them, the main place for you guys to come and speak is, yes, call into the MCD meetings and share your concerns, which they did not take us up on that offer, but to come here to the assembly and explain the process and the different meetings we would have. And
I feel they thought we had the cart before the horse, but we wanted our approval.
before we invested the money into this big.
I said we record these, so if you could identify yourself, and you can sit up here if you'd like.
I'm Nicholas Holbrook, one of the other owners.
Well,
if you look on page 16 of 170, it says in bold print, the Northeast Community Council is not obliged to even put you on the agenda.
Yeah.
And that's the attitude that the previous board had, so.
They softened up.
These guys were swimming upstream from the beginning.
But in fact, that's true. I mean, you could do your community meeting elsewhere. It's nice to do it at community council. It seems like they would embrace that opportunity.
Yeah, and we did, we made copies for everybody and went twice
Yeah.
and gonna go a third time's the charm.
Yeah, I think they're just unfamiliar with the process. They kind of got caught off guard. They thought we were trying to sneak around it, and we had to work through all that. But I think that now things are in a good place, and I think they'll be all right.
Good. Mandy?
I was just gonna address the comments about the full packet. So it says that the full packet should be given to the local governing body as well. And I talked to AMCO about that. And so they kind of had some clarification in that time-wise, it's the notice and then the application once it's deemed completed.
Right.
That was kind of the intent behind how it was written. But functionally, when we write things versus how it happens, they kind of sometimes don't mesh. And so that was something we addressed to and called AMCO and understood we would get it when it was actually reviewed.
Yeah, and deemed
So,
complete.
I mean, we have that.
So I'm going to make, after all these years, I should know, but you do a community meeting right out the gate when you are just noticing.
I don't do that. I try to wait until we have a completed application before I do a community council meeting, because I like to have the application and material for the community council meeting for the people that are interested to see the plans. So I notice them right away, right? But I don't actually mail out the 21 days in advance community council invite until I've actually got some operating plans written and I've actually got some diagrams written. So I don't just go in there like, hey, we are going to do this, but we don't have any idea how we're going to do it.
But that's your community meeting.
That's the community
And you
meeting, yeah.
try to do it at the community council.
I try to do it. I always try to do it at the community council if we can.
But once it goes through the process and comes to the city, then you do a notification.
Again.
And the routing.
And
of the
it
packet.
is a meeting. Is that always at the community council, or can that also be offsite?
There's no meeting.
No, there's no
Yeah.
Oh, there's no, so you do a mailing, but
We
there's
just
no
we just
required
mail
meeting.
the application, to the community council for comment.
But you send out the postcards too.
For the
It's like
Oh,
public
yes,
hearing,
yes,
yeah.
we do, right.
That's for the public hearing.
That's for the public
in front of
hearing.
us. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah,
Is
there's
there a fix
multiple.
needed then to clarify, or is it just kind of where it is?
Well, it's not our code,
That's
it's
the
the
state.
state that has it written, that it's the packet.
Okay. Dean?
This makes me think if we postpone to the 24th like they requested, we need to redo public hearing notices.
We don't need to postpone, it's just set. It's already set for the 24th, correct, Manny?
Oh,
We're
yes.
knowledge.
So you would just continue the public hearing, right? Or, I'm confused, because I remember I thought we had talked about it and it was gonna be a motion to continue it to the 24th. So you didn't have to renotice
So-
That would have gone. Okay, so it's on for the 10th. We'll open the public hearing and continue it to the 24th?
That's what I'm hoping that the body will
It shouldn't be
do.
a problem.
We don't know yet. We can-
Again, just
As long
for
as we
two
remember.
reasons, I won't be here. and the
Don't
community
know
council
that
will
it,
Sure
I don't know that it made it on the agenda for the 10th.
Oh, it's not even on the agenda?
I don't think so.
Oh, is this, this
Yeah.
one, sorry, this one's not on the agenda.
It's not, it's just gonna show up on the
Yeah, I
24th.
didn't
Oh,
say
It's
that.
already
okay.
set.
Yeah.
Oh,
It's
that's
already
news to
handled.
me, sorry.
That's good.
That's even better though.
Yeah.
Yeah, takes the S work out of it.
That works.
But the notice period covers,
The whole time.
Yeah.
You're right, that covers it.
Yeah.
Continue public hearing.
So anything else on this one? Recommendation?
I move that we approve,
Recommended?
recommend approval.
Second. Any opposition? So, just to clarify, so we're just a committee. So when it comes up, several weeks from now, to the full assembly on a Tuesday, we'll open the public hearing, people can speak, and then when it comes to decision, we'll make a comment, say, okay, we reviewed it, our committee meeting, we recommended approval, but we're just part of the assembly,
Right.
so it has to go to a full vote.
Okay.
But I hope you would come.
Oh, yeah.
Right, I will do that.
All right, great, thank you.
Awesome.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jason and Bill, you wanna pull up a seat? Okay, so next one up is
Janet.
modification of Alaska Rustic, and is that? Is there a license issue then, or is it?
Nope.
No, so it's just, Ryan?
Yep, thank you, Mr. Chair. So the Alaska Rustic LLC is applying for a modification of their special land use permit for a marijuana cultivation facility. The proposed modification will expand their cultivation area, the licensed cultivation area, by 1,425 square feet to a total area of 2,301 square feet. And this is an increase of 163% as compared to the existing size of the licensed premises, which is 876 square feet. Alaska Rustic LLC was originally approved by the Assembly on August 9, 2016 via Assembly Resolution 2016-214 as amended. And that was included in the full staff package for your review. And that was for the 876 square feet of licensed cultivation space. And the petitioner would like to expand their operations by further enclosing an existing structure located on the property. And this will result in an increase of 1,425 square feet of available cultivation area. However, I will point out too, and the petitioner can go into more detail on this, but they're not going to, their active cultivation space will not exceed 500 square feet. So they're still going to be under the limited cultivation license with the state. The municipality does not differentiate between limited and standard cultivation, but at the state level, they'll still have the limited cultivation. This site is located northeast of the intersection of Powerline Road and Ray Hollow Lane within the TA district, that's the Tourniquet Arm district. And daily hours of operation are Monday through Saturday, 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. And as of this writing, there have been no recorded municipal violations. And the planning department does not believe that this modification will result in any adverse impacts to neighboring properties and recommends approval.
Okay, thank you. Any questions on this one? Pete?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So is the sawmill still there? Is that still active?
Yes, sir.
So I would imagine that some of the leftovers from when they're doing their work might come in handy for mixing in with your
We use
garbage.
that as compost with waste, yep, mix it with the waste.
All right, fantastic. Thank you.
So you're keeping the 500
Yes, sir.
square feet, and I forget what are the advantages or features of keeping it 500?
The cost is quite a bit less for the renewal of the license. And so for the extra square footage that I would gain if I tried to get more than that, beyond going through the whole process again with the state, it probably wouldn't be worth the extra money in, licensing fees, because there's quite a jump from the 500 to the standard.
And so what are you doing with the extra space?
I'm gonna use it for my workshop and for my carpentry and sawmill business. I still value my woodworking space.
So it's not really good. I mean, I was there once and you had like a barn, you were enclosing it.
Yeah, and so I enclosed about less than a third of the existing building, and now I'm gonna enclose an additional third, and about a third of it will be left for my workshop space.
And so there are some changes to the premises diagram for the marijuana facility, just moving some walls, moving some things around. So it's kind of a reconfiguration of the existing space, expanding that a little bit, and then the other enclosure will be not for the licensed premises.
So would this expanded area only be used for marijuana-related stuff, or is it also some marijuana stuff, some sawmill?
There's no interchange between the two businesses. Like there's, the security door and everything are within the facility of Alaska Rustic, and the other part of it is more like a workshop garage space.
Kind of, I guess, if you don't mind. So you have to get permission to expand to the full site even though you're not using that part, so that's.
That was part of the building permit, and during the building permit, I outlined the entire building, even though it wasn't necessarily part of this expansion, but it was part of the building permit.
Okay, any other questions? It's an interesting, I mean, it's just a big wood building. It was the sawmill, right?
Yeah, and sawmill's still inside there.
Broken out part
But I'm
of
gonna
it.
move it, yeah.
So it's fairly unique in the industry, I think. Any more comments? Recommendation?
Recommend approval.
Second.
Any opposition? Okay. So you've been through this before, so you'll come up on, are you on the 10th?
I believe so.
Okay. So when it comes up, we'll just say, hey, we talked to you about it, recommended approval, go to a vote of everybody.
Thank you for that.
Good, all right, thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. Have a good day.
Okay, next one. So, Mrs. Picola, if you can sit up here if you like.
So you all set then?
So where are we on this? Do we go through the licensing here, Andy, or are we just
So
update on
we
where
already
are?
did, this is kind of an update on the status. So the assembly had voted to postpone action on the license to the 10th. And so this is kind of an update for that.
And we voted to postpone, we wanted to postpone because, as I remember, it's just really the one issue is the ground owner had not approved having a marijuana establishment on there. And so is that our question today? Where are we moving with that?
That's correct, Mr. Chair. So, property owner has not, still not provided authorization for the applicant to submit the special use permit application. And there also is a pending appeal at the state level with the AMCO that the applicant can provide some clarity on.
Well, before we get to that, we'll let you speak. And appreciate your long letter.
Oh, yeah.
So you don't have to reiterate that. We got that. So
Okay.
it's quite a story. So basically, we can't move forward anyway. He doesn't have permission from the guy who owns the ground. So this is an update, and basically we're still parked. So what would our action be? To extend again, or do we say come back, start over? Where does this leave us?
I guess that, at the last meeting, when we were discussing this, there was some discussion to postpone indefinitely. How do you bring something back if you postpone it indefinitely? What does that look like? So they decided to postpone, I believe, for 2 months, from July to September. You could do the same thing in this case, just postpone it to a date certain rather than postpone indefinitely. That way it would have a guaranteed date of being turned in. But as of today, there had been no updates either at the state level or municipal level.
Okay. So. Okay. Pete?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I'm trying to remember correctly, was one of the issues that the landowner lived out of state? Is that the situation?
No, the landowner actually lives in the state. He's in charge of Alaska Pacific Leasing here in the state, and the building owner actually lives out of state.
The building was out of state. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Crystal?
Thank you. My question's a little bit more about process and what happens with the state. How receptive are they to calling them and saying, hey, where are you guys at this in your process? Do they, I mean, can they give you an idea about when they might be deciding on this appeal, or you just
I think with appeals, it's a lot harder. Other things, they are able to give answers of where they're at on stuff, but appeals are a little harder, I think.
So we don't really know if this is something that might take another 2 weeks or another 6 months. I'm just thinking in terms of how we would come up with a date specific of when we postpone this.
Actually, we are supposed to be in front of AMCO on September 10th to be heard again for our bill.
That helps. Okay.
On the same day as our schedule for the assembly meeting. So that's kind of a busy kind of day there.
Okay.
So basically, we went the informal. We had some consultation from a person I used to know a long time ago, Cynthia Franklin, ex of the AMCO board. She gave us good advice on how to appeal this process with the state, to go the informal route, and then if that doesn't work out, go the formal route. We were just gonna go formal, but she suggested that we go both routes. So the informal will be September 10th. We'll get some kind of answer from the board at that time. And then if that is in our favor, then we will go the formal route of appeal, which will take probably another month after that. So that's where we're kind of at.
Okay, so 2 months might be okay for us.
And your formal route, is that Superior Court? What's the formal appeal?
The formal goes in front of a judge, Basically, he'll decide the fate of, Studio 420.
Okay. And what's your status with the ground owner?
The ground owner, actually on yesterday, we received word from the building owner that the ground owner, David Falk, had just responded back to their emails, even though they've been emailing them this whole time. He thought that we had just given up on the idea and thought it would just pass, but apparently he's getting his lawyers involved now and wants his lawyers involved to draft up something with the building owner that says that he's not responsible for any kind of legal actions that may pertain to Studio 420. So they're gonna try to draft something up in that favor.
Dean?
Yeah, did you say September 10th is for an administrative law judge?
No, September 10th is the informal, which will be just the board. We'll be in front of the board.
And you have a date in front of a judge?
No, after September 10th, if we believe, based on the evidence that we provided to AMCO, because they were given facts and information that was incorrect, we believe with the new evidence that hopefully, they'll rule in our favor and pass us. If not, then we'll officially file a formal appeal.
Okay, Matt?
I also,
I'm sorry, so go ahead.
I have one more question. If I remember right, when your applications for AMCO, the board, marijuana control board, they didn't make a motion and vote, right? They just didn't take any action.
Yeah, even though they requested us to be there in person and we did our due diligence by applying Fairbanks, they basically, just didn't motion us forward or anything like that. So we were surprised, and Erica was surprised, because basically in order to appeal something, you need to have something to appeal. So she was kind of confused too. So that's why we had a meeting with Erica, and we presented her with the evidence that you guys received. And she thought it might help, in giving some kind of light to the situation. So that's what we're hoping for.
Okay. Dean?
And if I remember right, also Erica McConnell in her letter about the result, she called it a de facto denial, right? Because they didn't take action. She called it a de facto denial. And I just wanted to mention this to the county. It just seems to me that the Marijuana Control Board, they didn't develop any record for the basis of their denial. So I would think that if they don't do anything informally for a judge, that the judge would just send it back for them to actually take a vote and state some reasons on the record, so that the judge on appeal can actually have some basis to form a decision as to what the board did. But that's just sort of, I can't guarantee that's going to happen. That's what I'm predicting. But so if that happens, it will go back and forth. That might take longer than a month or two. I don't know.
Well, from what Erica told me, she said the formal appeal moves pretty quickly. I guess once we file for the formal appeal, within a week or two, the date will be set to be heard before the judge. So, and then I think basically after that time, basically if the judge rules in the favor, it doesn't go back to AMCO at all, it just moves forward with the licensing.
Okay.
And one thing that Erica was concerned about too is that she wanted us to do the informal appeal first too, because the formal appeal is so expensive for her department to take on that kind of, I guess, expense. So that's why we went this route to go to the informal.
Erica would know better than I.
All right, thanks. Meg?
I think, in terms of postponement, I guess I wouldn't postpone too far, because after September 10th, if they go back in front of AMCO, we'll know if they're gonna go through the formal appeal process. And the regulation says to Superior Court. I don't foresee that being a quick process. So we'll have some information at that point. I hate to just keep pushing it off and off and off. Unless we want to push it off like a significant chunk of time. Because it seems like otherwise we're just gonna keep coming back to it every 2 months. I mean, I've never gotten anything quickly through the Superior Court. It's months, it's 6 months.
I think, well, Erica told me that she has, I guess, a special, it's not, I guess the judge is specifically designed or put in that place to hear formal appeals for AMCO, so I don't think it goes the regular route of Superior, where you go on a waiting list.
Okay, did you have Crystal?
Well, no, actually, if you'll finish in that vein, I might answer my question.
Janet, did you have something?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, and I don't represent, this licensee, but it goes, informal conference with with the director, which it sounds like you had, and then a formal appeal with the marijuana control board, which sounds like you're doing on September 10th, and then if you don't like that, you appeal it, and it's an administrative law judge.
Right.
And so it's an administrative law judge, they issue an opinion, and then it does go back in front of the marijuana control board, and they decide whether or not they want to follow that administrative law judge's ruling. And if you don't like whether they decide whether to follow it or not, then you appeal to Superior Court. That's the
Okay.
In the informal hearing, do you actually get a decision that day, or is that something they meet and write up a week later?
The September 10th, like I said, we're supposed to be telephonically with the board, and I don't know how the process works. I know they're either gonna accept
usually
it.
that day.
He would get, if he's in front of the control board on the 10th, he will get a decision, yes or
That
no.
day, okay, all right, okay, so we do know that then.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and it seems to me like you are making progress if you're at least communicating with the landowner, and it sounds to me like he's just worried about liability.
Yeah.
So as long as you get something written down that makes him feel secure and him not ending up getting sued if something goes south, then I think you seem to be making progress.
Yeah, we believe we are. That's a big step right there. That he was actually, responding back to emails and phone calls. So.
Yep. Thank you.
Kind of to Meg's point, what if is there a problem with extending it for 2 months and it comes back to us and we extend it another 2 months? Meg, you had concerns on that?
We can keep doing that, but it just feels like we're kicking the can down the road. At some point, because it sets a weird precedent for other applicants who kind of get in this sticky situation, is that they just kind of continue to remain open. There's no natural conclusion to it then that I'm aware of. Maybe there is. Something will expire at some point, but otherwise it's just this long period of uncertainty. I don't know. That makes me a little bit uncomfortable just because there's no end date.
So this one is a little bit different because they are appealing. For typical applicants where it's issues that they have to resolve, the board will put an abeyance period on them. And so there is a date certain if there isn't a lift of protest. So the municipality issues a protest of all marijuana licenses right off the bat pending a municipal license. Mm-hmm. So we have protests lodged on all of these licenses, and when they go before the board sets a date that the protest has to be lifted or the application dies. This one is kind of weird in that they're appealing, so I think that affects that situation. And so it wouldn't be a typical situation, but...
Well, I meant this kind of sets an interesting precedence potentially for us, or how we want to deal with ones that are in appeal.
Yeah.
I guess I just want us to think through it carefully because the appeal process could be lengthy. So I'm just trying to think it through in terms of how long we want to just keep something open because it's in an appeal.
We got a couple here.
Go ahead, I'll chime in.
Yeah, it seems to me that this appeal process in the regulations is 2 steps. One's you appeal to the board, again, in the informal process, and then second, you can appeal that decision to the Superior Court. It seems that right now he sent that first part where the board is going to look at it again. Maybe we'll know in 2 months, and maybe they'll come out and approve it, I don't know, but I would think that within 2 months we'll know if he's going to the second part, going to Superior Court or not. And at that point, if it's in Superior Court, like we maybe pointed out, that's different than another process we've had. I don't think we've seen one go to the court before, but since we don't know when it would come back, when the Supreme Court will make a decision and be done, or if it goes on to the Supreme Court after that, it would make sense to me to postpone indefinitely at that time. And I did look into the postpone indefinitely motion. You can renew the motion to approve. You make the motion to approve this application, and then the motion to postpone indefinitely. You can renew the motion at a different later meeting, as long as whatever the motion to approve is for is still viable. It hasn't become ineffective for some other reason. So you could postpone indefinitely 2 months from now, and it would be in limbo until we hear back, or maybe it comes back, or maybe it's just dies. But you can come back if you know, it's a favorable decision from the Superior Court and board again at some point in the undetermined future. And if the application that we had, the motion to approve for, is still viable after all that process, appellate process, any assembly member can ask the clerk to put it back on the agenda and renew the motion to approve the application. So convoluted, but I think that would make sense to me to postpone for 2 months or so, or then see what happens at this first appeal stage. If it goes to Superior Court, postpone indefinitely.
Work around it. Okay, Crystal.
Well, yeah, and I just want to agree. I think that's true, that this is in process. I mean, there's a procedure going on here. We don't really have grounds yet for denying this. I mean, we're still waiting for answers. So if it takes more time, it's not, I guess I'd look at it, it's no skin off my nose to, to say, okay, you're going through this process and we're just not at a place yet where we can say yay or nay. So we kind of have to let that procedure work itself out. So if we have to postpone for 2 months, I'd be agreeable to that. If we want to say indefinitely and bring it up when we need to, then I'm agreeable to that. The interesting thing is we could have an answer on September 10th.
Right.
Yeah.
Either way.
Right.
So I certainly don't want to just say, okay, we're done. So thank you.
All right, thanks. Was it Manny or Brian? I heard Jana had a comment or something.
So I guess the board changed some of their procedures.
Yeah, they just changed the rule where they say that they have to deny, because there's a regulation that says if a local government protests the license, the board has to deny it unless it's arbitrary and capricious. So that's why they've been denying applications with a abeyance period to get your protest lifted, for specifically really for Anchorage applicants. So that's changed, so they approve it, but with the condition that the local government has to release their protest, and it's a change in the regulations. And I'll find it and send it to Mandy, so she has that. It's pretty technical little.
Okay. Thinking about the delay, I mean, in some regards, we delay almost all of them. In ways, we say, okay, we approve this based on these conditions, and some of these conditions could take 6, 7, 8, 9 months to work out, right? You got to get your parking right, you get your landscaping in, you get a CCO, right? So but we've delegated it, so it is a long time. But we're done. So a potential thing here could be we can say, okay, we think this is fine. But, I mean, we can't really do it because we don't have the ground owner's permission. But if we did, and it's just an AMCO issue, we could say from our side we're good. And you say one of the conditions would be, the parking, the landscaping, and that they get a state license, which is already kind of the rule. And then we're done as far as assembly. But when Mandy gets the information, then it's approved. So we often postpone for a long time, but it's just we don't notice it.
That's not our action, though. That's kind of, we're not postponing our action, I guess. That's
We're not
what I'm
postponing
saying.
our action.
Yeah,
Right.
and I get the sense that the assembly kind of has a culture, at least, of not continually postponing. We like to kind of get our business done and move along. And that we want to kind of set a process by which we're consistent. And so that's the thing. If I agree with Crystal, if this gets resolved on the 10th, great. If it starts to jump through these various levels of procedure, in terms of going to an ALJ and then whether or not AMCO wants to follow that, and then possibly the Superior Court, I think we need to think deliberately about what we want to do when that happens, so that we can treat licensees in the same way, because those processes can start to take a considerable amount of time. And our hands are tied. We can't do anything when it's a fundamental issue that prohibits the assembly from saying, yes, you could go forward, and then, when everything's met, then, the license will issue. when it's one of those fundamental issues, because I think those are gonna be the stickiest ones, and I just want us to be consistent and conscientious about how we do that.
Well, what if we were, I mean, but potentially we could approve it with the conditions that, one, the ground owner says yes. And then I still think there's some parking and landscaping issues. I don't know if those have been resolved at all. They were in the packet.
The parking issues were, we needed to add another handicap parking spot, and the lines needed to be extended, that were already there and we marked. And, I believe we almost met the right amount of parking spots. I believe we were one or two shy of, meeting the model requirements. So with any kind of reconfiguration of the parking lot, I'm sure we could fit those 2 parking spots in. But other than that, the mall met all requirements except for maybe landscaping.
Was there an issue there?
There is, yeah. They could be satisfied through a non-conforming determination.
Right.
But that hasn't been done yet.
That has not been done.
And that would be one of the property owners would typically initiate that, though Mr. Spicola, could he walk over here and say, hey, I want one for this property?
He could start the application, but he couldn't submit the application until the property owner gave authorization for it, because he doesn't own the property.
And it's the guy who owns the ground.
Correct.
Okay, so that's all.
And that's a big argument between the building owner and the property owner, because they have a lease that says that basically the building owner should be in charge of all parking and all building aspects and rental and all that stuff. And so that's why it's a confusing situation. And another thing too is, we're officially asking, the director, Whitaker, is it Whitaker?
Michelle McNulty.
Michelle McNulty, to make, put a decision in writing based on Steve's determination of what he read in, the lease agreement between the landowner and the property owner. And, we're asking, I guess, Michelle to define property and property owner, because when we first started this process, we had came to Ryan and we had asked for official legal determination from your legal department about what constitutes property and property owner. And the law department came back with a definition of, like, we didn't even need David Falk's permission anymore, that we can move forward with the process without him, because we had the building owner's permission. The manager, Steve, got involved and decided that Ryan and the law department didn't make the right decision. And that's when this whole situation became confusing. Because then he required, he wanted basically the property owner's permission instead of the building owner's permission. So that's when everything got intertwined.
Okay, did you have a comment?
I can provide some clarity on that. I had a very quick conversation with a staff member from the legal department regarding whether or not a building owner who had permission from the property owner to rent to whomever they see fit would suffice for property owner authorization. The initial assumption was yes, but the legal department quickly took that back and said, no, we need authorization from both the property owner and the building owner, which is clearly stated in code. And Mr. Spicola is asking for an interpretation of that, just to get it in writing.
Right.
What's clearly stated in code, that it's only the building owner?
It's property owners. So everybody who has an interest in the property has to give authorization.
Okay, Meg?
Yes, thanks. So my thought here too is when we, I've been thinking about this a little bit more. We could recommend approval and kind of possibly have this issue sticking out there. I mean, is that something that the department wants, with this big looming issue, or would they rather it be held until we get kind of resolution before the assembly takes action? I guess I'd like to hear what, because these will be the ones, the ones that kind of go through this appeal process are gonna be ones with kind of big sticky issues likely looming out there that aren't just our normal conditions.
Mr. Zelta, was the question whether to add a condition that they obtain authorization from the property owner and then you can move forward, or not withholding action until everything gets sorted out with you?
What's your preference? That's kind of the question.
Okay.
Because I'm trying to think about this as a consistent process moving forward, where we have these kind of bigger, stickier issues that are maybe going to take some time to resolve. And I was curious what your preferred operating method would be?
Our preferred operating method, because we do recognize that we have accepted the application in error because authorization from the property owner was never given. So our preference would be that action be delayed until property owner authorization is obtained, and then more importantly, action by the assembly be delayed until the issues at the state level are resolved.
But somewhat keep it alive, so that the goal to, someone makes a motion to approve, and then follows with motion to postpone indefinitely. That makes it easy to bring back, essentially. So you guys can work on it, and then when things get settled, we just bring it back on the next agenda, and that works.
We could do that. I mean, Dean would probably have better insight on exactly how the process works. But I think we would likely have to renotice it if it was 30 days or more, which that's a simple thing for us to do.
Well, we'd have to make sure we did that. So we'd have to remind us at the assembly. Dean?
Yeah, like Mr. Yali said, you would want to put it on the agenda, but consult with planning about the timing for what date so they can do legal notices and so forth. I also had one question. The state doesn't have that same requirement. That's in Title 21 about permission of the property owner. Is that right? So we got state application deemed complete even without the property owner's authorization. But the state doesn't worry about that. They deemed it complete. It's just from my understanding, it's that we need that property owner's authorization for our application to be complete.
Mr. McCullough?
And on that point was brought up when we did our state application. The state was well aware that there was two property owners, and they may have supplied them a copy of the lease and everything. And they had no problem with us being deemed complete with the state application or anything like that, or getting his permission at that time. And another thing that concerns me too about postponing indefinitely is that we were made aware at the assembly meeting. I believe Dean brought it up because you guys were counseled on what the definition of postponing indefinitely means. And I believe postponing indefinitely means that it's postponed until the assembly board meeting meets again. And someone said that would be like in April or something like that. So that was confusing.
We meet twice a month.
Okay. Because it was a big board meeting, like at the assembly, it was a big discussion of what exactly does postpone indefinitely mean. And that's why they chose to postpone this till September 10th instead of postponing this indefinitely, because they said that it'd be harder for us to get back on the agenda if it was postponed indefinitely.
We discussed that.
April?
Not April. Just how difficult it can be sometimes to bring something back that was postponed indefinitely. The mechanics of it, we were all unclear on the mechanics, but Dean gave us the mechanics of it, and so did Barbara.
And the mechanics were fairly simple.
I think we even have it in the email now.
Yeah, okay.
So we have a step-by-step guide.
Right, so I don't think that, it turns out that's generally, in my experience, what we've done, when we postpone something indefinitely, what we mean is we kill it for all eternity.
Right, okay.
But that is not literally what it really is.
Okay.
So apparently it is something you postpone indefinitely, but any assembly member can bring it back at any time. So a constraint would be the 30-day notice that would go out, but then we can bring it back. And we meet at least twice a month.
Okay.
Pete?
Thank you. And so we'll be getting additional information on Tuesday because you're going in front of the Marijuana Control Board. And so if things go well there, you might be in a situation where you might want to appear on our agenda sometime in October. So I don't think we're at a point where we would need to postpone this indefinitely at this point.
Well, in fact, maybe we could deal with it. And if you have bona fide letter from the ground owner that they worked it out, and if AMCO approves it on Tuesday, would we have something then that would they have a document ready right then?
Or next Tuesday?
We couldn't do it on the 10th. That would be, it'd be really hard because the board meets the entire workday and we have to provide documentation to the agenda like last Friday, so it would be like a late on the table kind
But I
of
thought
thing.
he's on the agenda for Tuesday.
The permission would have to be added, the property owner's permission signature.
Oh, it's like part of the packet that goes towards it, I got you. Okay, but, so we could know on the 10th that everything's squared up,
Could potentially do the 24th.
but it's on the agenda for the 10th, so on the 10th is the time, if we had that information on the 10th, I mean, if we had word, and you say at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, AMCO approves you,
Right.
somehow we know, and you have some documentation that the ground owner, I'm speculating that would,
Right.
what would be that documentation be? What do we look for?
We need a letter of authorization.
Just a letter signed, but so if you had that letter on the 10th, we could say, okay, we got this information, so we could say postpone till the 24th, then you publish that information.
Do you need to republish?
Yeah,
Do
does
you
that,
need to renotice
does
at
that
this
give enough
point?
time for notice?
We shouldn't need to renotice.
Because it's already been
because-
noticed for the 10th.
Yeah, that's what that.
So we could potentially do, if we got all of the documentation before 5 o'clock, we could do an AIM with the letter of authorization and the board's decision and attach it to the AR. And that would work.
It would work on the 10th or work on the 24th?
On the 10th, I think.
Lay it on the table.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, potentially, so, and if it doesn't happen, okay, AMCO, we don't know what they say, then we're kind of paying back, so what would we do in that case?
I would recommend then that we would move to postpone till October 8th, because that would give us another CEDC meeting to take it back up and kind of figure out where we're at in the process or what's happening.
Okay, so if we're comfortable, they've got the ground owner's recommendation, and AMCO said, okay, we can make it the 24th, otherwise we make it 10/8, is that it? That, no notification requirement, would that work for you guys?
That would work.
Okay. So a bit of an unknown, I mean, AMCO could say, to reject it, and then it goes in the appeal process, and that's our third scenario.
Right.
And at that point, then what, Meg?
If it goes into the unknown, then I would probably want to discuss postponing indefinitely until we get that resolved, and having a look at what that means, and because we would then be stuck in limbo for a really long time.
Possibly.
Yeah.
And that postponed indefinitely, we could bring it back. You don't have to go through the whole process. Okay. Does that make sense to everyone?
Yeah, but I think he might have about a year to bring it back as a motion, because an application, I guess, is only valid for a year, and that's correct. Especially
Well,
It's
the 1 year, I believe, is if somebody submitted an application and it hasn't been deemed complete within a year because they haven't submitted materials to us, but this application has been processed already, so I don't believe that 1 year cutoff applies.
I thought there was a cutoff on the postponed indefinitely. Or is that like forever? You could bring it back.
It is forever until some sort of event occur that makes it ineffective for some other reason. You know, that's why it's 2021, we have a 1 year limit. For an application, there's no action on it, then you have to reapply. If I remember that correctly. But Mr. Young knows this Title 21 better than I do. So,
Okay, so any other comments? We have three alternatives.
No, we'll just have to see where we're at on the 10th.
Right, yeah, communicate with us as soon as you find out what the
Yeah.
board says, so that we,
Absolutely.
if they give you the go-ahead, then we can try to get this AIM together and lay it on the table.
Okay.
So you need to we'll let Mandy know as soon as you find out.
I will.
Okay. If AMCO says yes and the ground owner says yes and we know before 5 o'clock, then we can postpone till the 24th. If AMCO says no, we can go to appeal. If the ground owner says no, then October 8th.
So in the first situation, if we get all of that, the assembly could approve
Well, we could
On the
with
10th.
the conditions on the 10th.
Okay.
So,
Yeah, we don't have to postpone it all.
yeah.
But I would think when you said that the owner disapproves, then we're done.
Yeah.
Then that's, we can't approve it.
But we could approve with that condition. I just think that's too much of a lift.
Yeah, the
Because
owner
like-
has to, we have to get the authorization letter, the planning
So
department
you're not even supposed to
requires
take this
that.
application unless it has that letter saying.
Correct.
Okay.
So they kind of slipped through the cracks.
Correct.
Yeah, and Brian made us aware too, there is official appeal process to the director's decision. So we might be even going that route as well.
Can you clarify that? What?
So that would be the director's determination on what constitutes a property owner.
Oh, that's right,
And then,
okay.
Mr. Spicola could appeal that determination. That would go before the zoning board of examiners and appeals. And if the zoning board of examiners and appeals thought that we were falsely, incorrectly defining what a property owner is based upon the definition of code, and that they were to make a finding that a building owner could give sole authorization for activity on property, then that would get rid of the issue for having to provide property owner authorization, or the ground landowner authorization in this case.
What if we felt like we should weigh in on how that's interpreted?
Please do.
Because that,
For future reference.
so basically, we could go back to the code and define, it says property owners, is that the phrase?
You could.
Yeah.
Good.
And clarify and say that this means every single person involved, all of them, at any level. Or we could say, if you just say the building owner, in this case, we would say the building owner because he's got some kind of agreement that specifies he gets to decide who rents.
Right.
Do we want to go back on everyone and say, what's your agreement with the ground owner? This is a pretty weird situation, but. What about the railroad?
You'd almost be getting into a civil, it'd almost be property by property because every lease is different and you'd be kind of getting into this civil matters at that point.
Right. So that gets tricky. If you move beyond saying every single property owner, however they're in there, these are pretty simple, really. But if you say, except sometimes, that gets very tricky. What happens if in the process of waiting here, someone opens up a church next door?
So this application's already been deemed complete and they're already in. So in terms of being considered existent at this location. So if a church were to move in next door, that would not push them out in any way.
Well, so what's the separation distance for the closest church or school right now?
I have to check the staff package, but I believe it's well over 500 feet. Closest protected land use is a child care facility 950 feet away, and that's straight line.
Okay. Thanks.
So we're doing anything else? We got Chris?
I just wanted to, sorry, I'm hiding in the corner, I wanted to chime in on the question of property ownership definitions. And I can't speak for the legal department, but I assume that where they drew from is actually not from Title 21, but from Title 7 dealing with taxation. And in that section, I'm sorry, Title 12, and in that section, there's two cascading definitions that are important. The first is the definition of property, which just simply says it means either real property or personal property. And then the second cascade is real property. The definition of real property means land, whether subdivided or not. So I think that, and there's more to it, but I think that if property appraisal, and we all get, most of us get the green card for property appraisal and know that both land has one value and any improvements upon that land have a second value, that property owner, property typically refers to the land or the real property, which doesn't matter in this case. So I think we can ask both the municipal assessor's office and legal for greater determination on this separation, but that might be the genesis of where they have come from in the past, because of the fact that you can have so many different owners on a piece of land. Think back to Raspberry Roots, where you have a land ownership, but you have a condo built upon that land. So now you're talking 8 owners. So that's just something to keep in the back of our minds.
Well, let's keep it on the front right now.
So did they have to get permission from all 8 owners?
That was my question.
That was something that we wrestled with. In that case, there was already agreement from the landowner, but I don't believe they had to get all of the other condo owners to sign off.
No, and it wasn't Raspberry Roots, it's AK Kush.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay, Kush, right, there you go.
Okay, so in that case, you have the ground owner and the condo owner covers everybody. That makes sense. Meg?
Do we cross-reference any of the definitions of property when we put it in our code? Are there any cross-references there?
I don't believe we included it in our definition. So.
Well, I didn't know, not if we didn't include it in our definitions, but if sometimes we just cross-reference code provisions, that might also. But I think
we can check.
it sounds like it's an issue potentially for the courts to decide, because
Well, no, we could clarify too.
we can clarify, but then there are also these lease agreements that kind of come in and do interesting things to the relationships that I think, if you read the lease agreement, it says that that particular individual supposedly has certain rights, and whether or not those rights are sufficient enough to convey permission to allow a marijuana facility on them, I think that's an open question. Can you convey those rights to, or is that tacit agreement by the landowner? I think this, I don't know.
I sure don't want to get into reading their leases that close. Dean.
I wonder if you meant by cross-reference to the parts of code, if you meant that our Title 21 cross-referenced Title 12, the taxation provisions that Mr. Shirley mentioned. But aside from that, I think that in property law, the fee simple ownerships, the greatest ownership you have, you give away the bundle of sticks. And I think that, I forget who mentioned it, whatever you give to a building owner, it depends on that ground lease between the landowner and building owner and what they decided to give to them. Maybe it was the right to allow any lawful use in the building, and then that might just cover it, but I don't know what the lease said. So.
That's exactly what the lease says. My building owner has owned that building for over 30, since 1985.
Right.
And he says that he's never had to go through these kind of hoops ever. He's always determined what tenant was going in there, how long they were staying there, when they were leaving. He's been in charge of all upkeep for that mall, both the parking lot and the building itself. He's never had to have a David Falk sign off on any permits that he's ever made any kind of improvements to that building. He's stomped on this whole situation. He can't believe that he's going through this. David Falk, the landowner, is also very upset because he believes that since that building was built so long ago, that everything on that building should be already grandfathered in, that he shouldn't have to sign any kind of non-conforming determination. He's had tenants move in and out over the years and never had to sign any kind of non-conforming determination or make any kind of special land use upkeep or anything like that, even though there's a liquor store in the mall that requires a special land use permit. Everyone's confused.
Okay, Dean?
I really think the question of what it means by property owners is the planning department's determination, and as interpreting Title 21, that's pretty much their job. And if they need legal assistance, they could ask for one opinion from the law department. But whatever is decided, like Ms. Salatala said, maybe the issue goes to court for really to interpret if planning interpreted what property owners means correctly or according to law. So it's a little unpredictable how things would go.
And that's why we were so confused when, because we thought we were dead in the water a long time ago with a special land use permit, because we were working with Brian hand in hand. And when we couldn't get that signature, we were willing to give up, and we were ready to call it quits and stuff like that. Ryan came back to us and said, I actually went to Ryan and said, hey, can you read me the definition? He read me the definition. I said, is property or property owners defined in your law section or anything like that? He said they weren't. I said, well, Ryan, I'm going to force you to go to your legal team and make a precedent decision. He went to his legal team. He came back. He said, you're good to go. We don't need David Falk's permission anymore. Talked to the legal team. They made a decision that, property and property owners aren't defined, that we can move forward with just the building owner's permission. We paid our $1,700. We we're on the track of moving forward. Ryan went on vacation to get married. I came in to ask about regular permits for for doing remodeling. At that time, I was told that I couldn't do it because I needed the landowner's permission. And I was like, well, we already have this covered, I don't think we do. That's when his manager became involved and made the decision that he made. Like, Ryan was wrong, the legal department was wrong. We're taking this back. We can't let you proceed forward anymore. And we were just like shocked, We're
Right, Ryan, yeah.
So the lease that, because we had requested a copy of the lease from Mr. Spicola just to take our own eyes on it. We're not attorneys, but the entities that were listed on the lease don't match the current property owners.
Exactly.
So there was a question, is the lease even still valid?
Right.
So anything in that lease, the terms, if it's not valid, does it even apply? Does the building owner actually have the right to lease to whomever they seem fit? That instantly was a civil issue in our mind. We're not going to get in the middle of that. Property owners is defined in code, but we did consult with legal. As I specified before, they did give me kind of a running interpretation, which they quickly took back. In the meantime of when they gave me the quick definition to when they took it back, Mr. Spicola had already paid his application fee. So at that point, we were kind of obligated to process the application with the condition that they provide property. I gave them, while we were processing it, the opportunity to get that property owner authorization. That was approximately a 2-month period, and we're still waiting on that authorization today. So that's kind of the boat that we're in right now.
Okay. All right, thanks, Dean.
There is a definition for owner in Title 21. I guess you reviewed that already. It's very broad. Anybody that has some sort of interest.
Okay, but, so this is maybe something to look at. Should we define property owner more crisply for the future? And without getting into intervening leases, you can think of something in terms of showing us at some point.
Mr. Chair, I don't know if the definition of property owner needs any tweaking in code. I think it'd be best, in my very non-attorney opinion, to keep it rather broad rather than make it very specific.
What you could add a phrase, all and every single one, without any doubt.
Yeah. So it's clear.
I'm not sure if that passes legal scrutiny. Okay, so anything else on this? So we kind of have a plan, a 3-tiered plan for Tuesday, and we'll see, and we'll wish you luck at AMCO, I guess.
All right. Thank you guys so much.
Do you know what time of the day you're on the agenda Tuesday?
They don't give times. They say, it's I believe it's a 3-day thing, but Erica told us specifically September 10th we do hers, so that's what we're looking for.
All right, keep us in the loop.
Thank you guys.
Anything else, Phil, you're here?
I am. I came mostly to talk to Chris about a particular topic, but since I'm here and Janet's here and Ryan's here, I'll just go ahead and make an announcement on their behalf.
Can you say your name for the
Oh, sorry. Phil Steyer from Chugach Electric. I think this is still true. You're making a presentation at the Anchorage Chamber of Commerce on the marijuana industry. You heard about that already? Okay. On a chamber meeting on Monday, the 23rd of September, I believe it is. So.
Nice.
Anything else?
What type of presentation is it going to be, Brian?
Whoa, it costs them $30 to find out.
I'm probably not going to make it there, so I'm just...
Yeah, it's a panel discussion between, I'm the only municipal representative there, but just be members of the marijuana industry, just talking about how the industry has impacted Anchorage.
Okay.
That's all I really know at this point. So.
I'll jump in and say I put Jana and the chamber together because different reasons, as I drive around and look at the facilities for Chugach, I've been struck by the amount of money that has been spent with engineers, architects, contractors, equipment suppliers, everything else, And you just have to figure there's a ripple effect in the economy from all of that. And I saw in a slide Jana had in a presentation she gave to the Marijuana Control Board that she said, I think her client base have hired like 550 employees. Now, and all of that is just new economic activity in the last few years. Anyway, I thought, the chamber might be interested in that perspective on what's going on. So anyway, I put the two of them together and they went from there. So
Good, thanks. Yeah,
I hope
like
they cover those
good
business
agenda.
impacts.
It sounds like the committee that organizes the questions had a list of questions on that,
Mhm.
so sounds like a good topic area.
Yeah, it's organized, the topics were organized through the Municipal Activities Committee and the Chamber. One of Phil's coworkers is the co-chair of that. And they're going to, I think it's unfortunate, but they're going to steer clear of the discussion on on-site consumption by inhalation in order to not appear biased, which is fair. But it will be a good cross-section to a room filled with business people, what the economic impact of this industry really is. And Ryan, most of you have seen through your 101s, Ryan has a great summary of the redevelopment, community development impact of this industry.
Okay, anything else? You adjourn?